Welcome to Switzerland, the country where the trains run on time, the chocolate is perfect, and yes, there are actual rules about when you're allowed to flush your toilet at night. I know that sounds like I made it up. I promise you I did not. When most Americans think about Switzerland, we picture watches, cheese, maybe a ski resort. A peaceful little country tucked in the Alps, minding its own business. The kind of place where nothing bad ever happens and everybody's just fine. Super fine. Perfectly, quietly fine. What we don't picture is a country with one of the most quietly intense rule cultures on the planet. And I mean intense in a way that would genuinely make most Americans lose their minds. Let's start with the toilet thing, because I need you to understand this is real. In many Swiss apartment buildings, and this is written into actual housing contracts, flushing your toilet after 10 p.m. is considered a noise violation. Same goes for taking a shower, running your washing machine, even, in some documented cases, walking around your apartment in hard-soled shoes after a certain hour. Now, if you're an American reading this, your first reaction is probably, they can't actually enforce that, right? And here's where Switzerland gets fascinating. They barely have to. Because Swiss residents, by and large, just follow the rules. Not because someone's watching, because the rules exist. To understand why, you have to understand how Swiss society is structured from the ground up. Switzerland is not a country that runs on government authority the way most of us think about it. It runs on something much harder to export: collective agreement. The Swiss have a term for it, Rücksicht, which roughly translates to consideration for others. It's not politeness, it's not just manners. It's the operating system the whole country runs on. Your freedom ends where your neighbor's peace begins. That's not a slogan in Switzerland. That's genuinely how people live. And it goes way deeper than toilets. Switzerland has rules, formal or informal, governing when you can mow your lawn. Sunday is largely off-limits for noisy outdoor work in most cantons. Saturday afternoons in some areas too. Recycling isn't just encouraged in Switzerland. It is a finely sorted, legally enforced system where putting a glass bottle in the wrong bin can result in actual consequences. Not a fine necessarily, but social consequences, which in Switzerland might be worse. There are parking rules so precise they specify not just where you can park, but how long, what day, what time, and in some towns, whether your car can be considered an eyesore relative to the neighborhood aesthetic. I'm not paraphrasing. That is a real consideration in Swiss municipal codes. And here's what gets really interesting for an American brain to wrap around. Switzerland is also one of the freest countries on earth by almost every measure. Personal liberty scores, economic freedom, freedom of movement. They rank near the top globally. So how does a country have this many rules and also be deeply, genuinely free? The answer is that Switzerland made a trade Americans have never really been offered. They traded the freedom to be casually inconsiderate for the freedom to live in a society where almost nothing is chaotic, broken, or unpredictable. You can't blast music at midnight. You also don't have to listen to your neighbor blast music at midnight. That's the deal. Let me give you a comparison that might land differently. In America, we love to talk about freedom as the ability to do whatever you want, whenever you want. That's almost a cultural religion for us. But Americans also lose something like 8 billion hours a year to traffic. We spend roughly twice as long in administrative hassle, dealing with billing errors, insurance disputes, bureaucratic runarounds, as people in Switzerland do. We're free to do whatever we want, and a shocking amount of what we end up doing is dealing with the consequences of everyone else also doing whatever they want. Switzerland said no thanks. They built a system where everyone agrees to small inconveniences up front, so large inconveniences almost never happen. It's annoyingly effective. Now, I want to be fair here, because Switzerland is not some utopia, and they would be the first to tell you that. The rule culture has a shadow side. Switzerland can be a genuinely uncomfortable place if you're an outsider. Not because people are mean, but because the social codes are so deep and unspoken that newcomers violate them constantly without realizing it. Swiss residents have described feeling suffocated by the expectation of conformity. There's a quiet pressure that doesn't always leave room for difference, for noise, for the kind of beautiful messiness that makes cities like New York or New Orleans feel alive. The Swiss have the highest rate of second home ownership in Europe, and some sociologists think part of that is psychological. Having a place where you can exhale and just be a little loud without someone leaving a note in your mailbox. There's also the question of who these rules protect and who they burden. Switzerland has a large population of foreign workers and immigrants. Roughly 25% of the country is non-Swiss born. And the rule culture can land very differently depending on where you came from. What feels like order to a Swiss-born resident can feel like surveillance or social policing to someone raised in a culture where community life is naturally louder, more communal, more physical. The rules aren't neutral. They reflect a specific cultural aesthetic, and not everyone's aesthetic fits. But here's what I keep coming back to, and what I think is the genuinely uncomfortable question for Americans. Is the toilet rule actually crazy? Or is it only crazy to us because we've never lived in a building where you could actually sleep with the window open? We've never lived somewhere where your 2 a.m. decision to do laundry is recognized as, in some real sense, a choice that affects 12 other people? We built a country on individual freedom, and that's not nothing. That's actually extraordinary. But somewhere along the way, we stopped asking whether freedom without consideration for others is actually as free as it sounds. Switzerland asked that question like 400 years ago, and they're still sleeping soundly because of it. The toilet rule is funny. It's genuinely a funny thing to put in a housing contract. But the philosophy behind it isn't funny at all. It's one of the most effective social compacts in human history. A small country with no natural resources, 4 official languages, 26 semi-autonomous cantons that barely agree on anything, somehow holds together as one of the most stable, wealthy, and functional societies ever built. And it holds together not because of a powerful central government or a dominant culture, but because millions of people agreed, more or less voluntarily, to be considerate. That's the Switzerland story. And I think it's worth asking whether there's any version of that we could borrow, remix, and make American. Or whether we're too far down a different road to even want to. What do you think? Would Americans ever accept rules like this in exchange for a quieter, more predictable society? Or is that trade simply too Swiss for us? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know where people land on this one. And if you want to see more videos breaking down how other countries quietly solved problems we're still arguing about, hit subscribe, because that's basically all I do here.